Republican vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance is coming to La Crosse Monday, just one day ahead of the election. He's scheduled to speak around 9:30 that morning. Vance is expected to talk about how inflation, the border crisis, and economic policies of the Biden-Harris administration are impacting Wisconsinites. That same day, he will also make stops in Newton, Pennsylvania, Atlanta, Georgia, and Flint, Michigan. The Harris-Walz campaign commented on the last-minute battleground blitz. It reads in part, quote, J.D. Vance is coming to La Crosse to close a campaign that is more focused on Donald Trump and his own problems in Wisconsin families. This election comes down to a choice between Vice President Harris, who is fighting for you, and Donald Trump, who is consumed by his enemies list and plans for revenge, end quote.